Welcome back to our third and final installment of the Science Maker Lab Adobe Audition Introduction Training. In this video, we're going to cover the effects rack and how to use it to improve our narrated audio tracks. As we covered in video 1, the effects rack is found on the left side of the screen. For this lesson, we'll leave it set to track effects at all times. We'd only use the clip effects if we wanted to put an effect on only one segment of a track. As discussed in Lesson 1, we can use presets of multiple effects, but we don't want to do that here because the aim of using effects on our spoken word audio is to make different voices recorded on different equipment all sound like they were recorded at the same time and place. The order of effects is quite important, so the first thing we want to do is see if any of our tracks have a background hum or noise. As noted in Lesson 1, if it is loud, there will be little we can do about it without destroying the sound quality of the voice. But if it is pretty low in volume, then the real problem with the background noise is that when we switch to another narrator with none at all, we will suddenly notice it and then find it annoying. Our orange track has a great sound and good signal-to-noise ratio, so we will see if we can fix this. We've already manually done a bit of what we're about to do in Lesson 2 when we went through the audio clip and cut out the noises in the non-spoken parts. This works great for clicks and pops, but is very time-consuming for a constant noise like an office ventilation system in the background. Luckily, there's an effect that will do the same action for us. It's called AutoGate, and it's a bit hidden away. Our first order of business is to make sure that the track we want to add the effect to is selected, and that the corresponding track is indicated in the effects rack. To add the effect, we click on the white triangle at the right of the top cell in the effects rack. We then select Amplitude and Compression from the first drop-down and then Dynamics from the second drop-down. This will open a pop-up with AutoGate, Compressor, Expander, and Limiter in it. We will enable AutoGate. The main control knob that will adjust is the one called Threshold. The AutoGate shuts off the output of the channel if the volume drops below the threshold value. So, if the background noise is negative 30 decibels and the voice stays between negative 3 and negative 10 decibels, we can set this to negative 25, and all of our background noise will be shut off, while none of the spoken word sections are affected. This is a very fast way to do the equivalent of going through manually and using the razor to delete every gap between words.
To understand a spline, it's helpful to first understand what spline points do.
The next effect that we may want to use on a spoken word recording is a compressor. We access it by clicking on the white triangle, then Amplitude and Compression, and then Single Band Compressor. The compressor is useful if our narrator has a volume that varies enough that sometimes it's a little too quiet. The compressor will bring up the volume in the quieter portions so that it's closer to the same volume as the louder portions. Compressors are used at fairly extreme settings for radio hosts, and compression is a big part of the reason that these people sound much different on radio than they do in person. The only controls we really need to vary for our purposes are the threshold and the ratio. The threshold is the value below which the compressor will not try to even out the volume, and the ratio is how hard it will try to even out the quieter portions that it's trying to boost. The hard limiter, accessed by Amplitude and Compression hard limiter, can be useful when the recording is mostly even, but there are a few loud spots and you can't turn down the volume to control the loud spots without making everything else too quiet. We simply apply this effect and set a maximum amplitude, and it will keep the loud portions from peaking out and distorting on us. Both of these effects can make a person sound boomy and unnatural, so it might be necessary to apply a graphic equalizer to get their voices sounding more natural again after applying these effects. Equalizers can also be helpful in a case like the Science Maker Lab video narrations, where all of the mics used get us a good signal-to-noise ratio, but some emphasize higher frequencies and others boost the lower frequencies. In either of these cases, the graphic equalizer can be used to increase or decrease the volume at certain frequencies. Thus, we can add volume at high frequencies to make a voice sound clearer and hard consonants easier to hear, or we can add volume at low frequencies to make a thin-sounding voice sound fuller. When we speak, we have a primary frequency, which is the lowest pitch in our voice. So if we were singing the note of low E in a guitar, this frequency would be 80 Hz. However, we also have a lot of overtones in our voice, and consonants also make use of frequencies far from our primary vocal frequency. In fact, it's the overtones and the relative volumes of them at different frequencies that make us sound like us, instead of sounding like the exact same as another person speaking at the same primary frequency. The graphic equalizer is activated by clicking on the white triangle, followed by Filter and EQ, followed by Graphic Equalizer. The number of bands determine how many different frequencies we can control. We tend to use the 30-band equalizer to get the most control. For each of those 30 frequency ranges, the EQ allows us to raise or lower the volume of that specific frequency considerably. We'll play back a portion of a track with a few different
Let's
EQ
start by
settings to
taking
show
a
you how
regular
the tone
straight
of the
line
voice
and
changes
making a
as we alter the
zigzagging
settings.
line by giving it.
Note that from 8K and up, sounds like the T and S are accentuated. Vowels are accentuated at the lower frequencies.
Let's start by taking a regular straight line and making a zigzagging.
Humans generally can't hear anything above 20 kilohertz, and most speech doesn't go beyond 12 kilohertz. At the other end of the scale, even Nick's baritone voice almost never goes below 63 hertz, so all of the controls outside of that range can be put to the lowest setting without affecting the sound of the voice whatsoever.
Let's start by taking a regular straight line and making a zigzagging line by giving it multiple.
For people with higher voices, everything below 80 hertz can be knocked down, which can come in handy if there's a hum from fluorescent lights or the like, as the frequency of the electricity we use is 60 hertz, and that will sometimes be picked up by a microphone. If we turn the volume way down at 60 hertz, and the speaker is mostly talking near 160 hertz, we can eliminate the 60 cycle hum without affecting the sound of the narrator's voice.
Let's start by taking a regular straight line and making a zigzagging line by giving it multiple endpoints.
It can be pretty time consuming to tune the EQ perfectly for one person's voice. But luckily, once we get it how we like it, we can press the button at the top of the equalizer pop-up that looks like a download icon. This will save the settings that we put in as a preset that we can name. That way, the next time we get our 4 Lab Assistant files in, we can just use the presets for each narrator, and we'll get through this much quicker. Another effect that we can use is reverb. It puts an echo in while you speak. If one of our lab assistants is speaking in a big echoey room when they record, they'll get a natural reverb. So we can sometimes add it to the others to make them all sound like they all recorded in that room, like we have on my voice in this recording. While reverb isn't needed for narration, it can be fun to use as a special effect. Pigs in space! So experiment with reverbs to see what they do and what the adjustments on them change.
Another fun effect that Audition has built in is automatic pitch correction, better known as Autotune. This is accessed by white triangle, time and pitch, automatic pitch correction. This one is mostly useful for singing, but like any correction software, it works best if the original input is quite good and it's used as subtle settings. Now that we have all our tracks cleaned up, timed how we like them, and adjusted with effects to sound how we want them to, we are ready for a final check of the volumes. We will redo the track-to-track volume check to make sure that the effects we put on them didn't affect the volume balance between the tracks. We'll also double-check our pan left-to-right settings. If everything checks out, we are ready for saving and export. The Audition file, like a Premiere Pro file and a SolidWorks assembly file, doesn't actually contain the sound information. It simply references the files on the hard drive and keeps track of which parts of it wants to use and when. As such, an Audition file won't play on any other player, and if you rename an audio file you dragged it in, it will be gone when you open the Audition file again. We need to export it to turn it into a playable audio file. To do this, we click on File, Export, Multi-Track Mixdown, Entire Session. We then get a pop-up where we can name it, set a folder location for it to be written to, and select the format. Wave PCM works pretty universally, and works well for importing into Premiere Pro movies, so we tend to leave it on this setting. We leave the other settings in their default as well. To export, we press OK. Audition will give us a message when the export is complete, and we will find the new file in the location we specified. It is ready to use. We can now save our file and shut down Audition.
Well, that's it for the Adobe Audition intro lesson. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it, and we look forward to hearing your creations as time goes by. See you soon!